Hey, thank you, Senthil. We can start off.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Yeah, hello and welcome to all the members of IIT Alumni Industry Interaction Center. This evening, we have a very lively interaction with Mihir, founder and CEO of Pitstop, right? As a way of introduction, I'm Vinay Rao. I'm a principal at Venture East. Venture East is an early stage venture capital firm investing in India since 1997. We have invested in over 100 investments in that period, close to about 350 million asset under management. We primarily invest in businesses that are capital efficient and leverage technology to differentiate themselves while building a moat using data, right? So focus around technology and data have been very high with our investments. So we have done a numerous number of investments. Some of them, companies like Acko, MoEngage, Ekincare, Kisht, to name a few, right? So I'm very glad to welcome Mihir, founder and CEO of Pitstop, to this lively interaction. He is here to share his insights from his entrepreneurial journey, building Pitstop. We would like to sort of have this session as a very interactive one where we go through his journey of building this company all the way from from an idea stage to a growth stage company today, right? The challenges that he has faced both personally as well as from a building a business perspective. So hoping that this session becomes an inspiration to a lot of young entrepreneurs who are looking to start off and how do they visualize their journey going forward. So I welcome Mihir to this interaction. Hey Mihir.
Yeah, Vinay, thank you so much for having me here. Thank you to the entire Intra-IT team. And it's a pleasure to be here. I would love to talk about what we have done so far and would love to answer some of the questions. Yeah.
Great, Mihir. Great. So as a format, what we were thinking of is, we'll have an interactive session. We have a bunch of questions that, will bring out some of the deep insights from your journey. Towards the end, we can keep it open session where people can send in their questions through the chat option. I can sort of relay that to you, and we can answer some of the questions from the audience.
Sure, Vinay.
Great, sounds good. So Mihir, you have had a very interesting journey. You're a second-time entrepreneur, as well. You've been part of many startups before this, right? So let's take a quick view of what you did before Pitstop, right? And sort of how did you sort of start thinking about the next business and the journey there, right? So maybe a brief introduction about your journey up to Pitstop
Sure.
to just set a context of
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think it has been quite a fulfilling, rewarding, and in general, a lot of learning experience right from when I graduated from college. Right, so I worked in software companies. I don't come from automotive background. I come from software tech, consumer tech kind of background. All the while, worked in few companies early on. There were campus placement in Hyderabad, Bangalore, San Francisco, and since then on, sort of entrepreneurship journey began. I think 2005, 2006. When there was no ecosystem and there was a passion. We were very young and in general, it looked like that a lot of new technologies had come in. RFID was one of those passionate areas that I had. And I felt that automatic identification could have larger implication. And today, if you look around, there are a lot of such applications which are live. And then auto ID based, I mean, QR code is a great example. It's not really RFID, but in general, auto identification is a great technology. So started off working on a startup in that area, and we built a key solution for container tracking domain, which is for yard management, tracking of containers. Right. So I think all the while it was more of that freedom which propelled into entrepreneurship to begin with. And it started well advanced in IT days itself. I mean, we had a challenge called Megaworks, which was a sort of all India business plan competition, which we had won. At that point of time, we were setting up a mechatronics company. We had seen Lego toys, and Lego toys were very expensive. So me and my team members, we had created a sort of set of, I mean, mechatronics powered Lego bricks, which were much, much cheaper. It didn't require the computer science or the computer that Lego had. So it could become affordable to everyone. And I remember doing shows for a lot of kids at various places. I mean, in Bangalore also at that point of time, or my friends went to Tihar jail as well, because that's the idea of creation, that that mechatronics tool or Lego kind of allows you to build things on your own. And then depending on what strata of society you are, you start building those things which you observe. Right. So I think from then on, the whole entrepreneurship journey or the idea of it was there. But we were at the time of recession in 2002. So I had to go back to job. Right. And then worked in job. So I think it was always there too. And the freedom was one of the primary drivers there. Since 2005, I've worked in multiple startups as consultant, as product manager, as technical folk, right? And it has been a sort of learning experience. And whenever we build something good or great, or which has a very massive impact in a short point of time, it gave really a lot of confidence to go back and start something on our own. Right. So I think that's where the journey has been in consumer tech, in core computer science, tech, etc. And then moved on to Pitstop, which is a completely different domain altogether, right? And so yeah, it has been there. So first you start off with, let's say, the independence that entrepreneurship gives you, and then you get so absorbed or immersed in the problem that it becomes a sort of one-way traffic, right? That you
Yeah.
get inside solving that problem. So same in
Yeah.
container tracking domain. Today our solution runs live, which is run by my friends. It runs live in almost all the ports in India. It tracks container in real time, which used to take almost 7 days to track a container, and it was very risky. People used to climb up the container to find out the identification code. So I think that thrill of building solution was always there. I always cite that joys of life are in solving for very simple things. I'll just add one example. My wife, she used to work in a sales job, right? And she had to travel a lot. And at the end of the month, she had to file her conveyance report. And that used to be quite a lot task, because at that point of time, there was no location tracking, there was nothing, right? So
Yeah.
she used to manually write down something, look at Google, write down kilometers, etc. So that was the first app that I built on a J2ME phone, right, which she
Mhm.
used to carry, and that tracked her conveyance. So a 3-day affair manual, it became a sort of instant report. So I think that that thrill of building something which adds value has always been there, and that is what landed me into entrepreneurship all the time.
Absolutely. I think almost universally all entrepreneurs that I've come across have been someone who have been very, someone who observes things around them, right, and observes what are the challenges, what are that people are facing as an issue, right, and a lot of inspiration has come from those issues, and people have went on to build great businesses. So I think your ability to observe and identify these issues, I think is holding you in a very good stead as you build Pitstop as well, right? Something that I think all entrepreneurs should be very cognizant of and appreciate, right? Absolutely. So, Mihir, so for every business, right? I mean, typically there is usually a backstory as to why someone built it, right? What was the the core challenge, and why they felt so strongly about something about that issue that they went ahead and tried to solve it, right? I'm sure there's a backstory for Pitstop as well, as to why you went ahead and built this kind of a business. I think it'll be glad for people to just understand that thought process, right? And how do you basically yeah, you see an issue, people, everyone has an issue in their life, right? But how do you basically take that issue, how do you figure out a solution, and how do you sort of make it into a business, right? I mean, what's been your experience? How did you go about doing that?
Yes, I think it's derived quite a lot from what happened during that time, right? So I think there were two incidents. I mean, uh, my area of interest in general was conversational based AI. So right now, the
Mhm.
Pitstop entity name is called ChatPay, because that's what we wanted to build. Somebody who could conduct a transaction on chat, and that is what you see on a lot happening on WhatsApp at this point of time, right? So on one side, I was building a complete platform which was for transacting commerce. At the same time, I had a couple of bad incidences with authorized dealership or in general car service and repair, right? And it came incidentally that if you look around yourself, there are a lot of at least in 2015, right, there were a lot of entities which were not digitized. I mean, they were completely offline. There was no information, right, on pricing, on customer support was one of the biggest problem, and there were a lot of companies were trying to solve that part of it, right? So, I mean, I had got a clutch replacement done, and within 2 days, again, I had to go for a clutch replacement, and that guy, he insisted on getting a new clutch replaced, right? So those things happened, and then we realized that maybe this is the domain which needs digitization first. So that was the first thought which came into mind, that how could I superimpose this chat based transactional commerce platform, right, and digitize the domain, which gives much more visibility around the whole diagnostics, the whole commerce, or I could conduct a transaction. In automotive, especially, there was no recorded transaction at the point of time. The work used to happen on kacha bill or paper bill, or it used to happen without any evidences, etc. Right. So now, if I look back, I can join all the dots. But at that point of time, it were these two factors, right? That
Mhm.
automotive came out as a domain which was largely undigitized. There was nothing, and since you don't interact with that domain so much, you will
Yeah.
realize that around you, you will have grocery, pharmacy, you will have restaurants, and you will have something to do with auto. That's why you have a neighborhood garage. Every neighborhood has a garage. You will find a tire puncture shop. You'll find a washing guy, right? You'll find a washing guy cleaning cars in every apartment, right? Something to do
Yeah.
with auto was always there. So we felt that maybe if we could marry and digitize that. So that's when the idea or whole hypothesis around pit stop began for us.
No, absolutely. I think that taking it from there, right, and then making into a company. I'm sure there has been a lot of things that we learned along the way. There's a lot of pivots that we did. I'm sure we'll get into a lot of these details, right? But just from this stage where you felt there is a need in the market, right, and maybe you came up with a solution for that particular need, right? From there, how did you sort of go about sort of convincing other investors to come on board here to you, the first set of investors? I mean, it's always that is what is usually the most difficult part of it, right? Because once that is done and people see something in action, it's a lot more easy to believe. But I think the first set of investors really are believing in you and believing in the strength of your idea. So how did you go about convincing that set of investors?
Right. Yeah, so I think I'll attribute it to a lot of karma that was earned in years prior to pit stop, right? So I did work in a lot of startups. I had my own startup, right? And in general, going back to college, etc., had a very solid network. So I think a lot of times people under emphasize the importance of a support or a network system, right? So I think
Mm,
augment that with the karma. I mean, I had always worked in startup. I had a lot of colleagues, friends who knew about the work that I had done. I think, and then they could relate the passion, etc., which comes along with the work that does happen. So I think the
yeah.
first set of investors, they have either belief in you as a person, or they have a clear belief in the idea. Right? Something like, let's say, Google search. Somebody would have thought that Google search could be an amazing thing. That's
Mm,
a very long vision thing, but they would have also believed in two guys who would do it, right? So I think a lot of our initial investment came from the referral network or the network that we are part of, right? The early angels that we attracted. We have a long list of angels, and they're all marquee angels. I mean, if you look at Ramakant Sharma, I mean, he is the angel number one. If you look at in that context, his
yeah.
first investment was a pit stop in that sense, right? And then from there on, again, that referral network grew. So we had a lot of people. Ramakant was there. Anuj Ramakant, the founder of Live Space. Anurag, founder of Jungle Ventures. Rahul Garg of Moglix, right? So I think it's a combination of both to attract early investors. I mean, your network, your karma, all of that plays well. And I had solid support from those guys from day one. I remember calling up Ramakant. He told me that nahi yaar karenge. I mean, in a very simple language, and he believed, and he has been a big believer in Pitstop, and that's a big high as a founder, because eventually
Yeah.
when somebody pays you money, he endorses two things: one, the belief in you, and the other, that the idea would find its destiny. I mean, however small that may sound, getting
Yeah.
the first customer or having first set of people who would write code for you, those things are covered, right? And your basic subsistence gets covered in that regard, if you really look at it, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's important, that the whole network and then the goodwill around it, right?
Yeah.
And from there on, you have to evolve as a person. And after a while, both company as well as you should speak, the team should speak. All those things come the factor. So I've been lucky in that regard. Then I had Bloom Ventures who had invested in my previous company, right? So I had a rapport with them as well, and they came in as first institutional in that regard, right? So I think again that it was the old karma, which sort of helped that got me an entry, or in general introduction to Bloom. Bloom was growing at that phase of time, and I always have high regards for Karthik, Sanjay, and everyone. They remembered the days of previous startup. So I think that network and that
Absolutely.
goodwill is very important, and they are the ones who actually keep you moving forward. Uh,
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. I think I usually always tell entrepreneurs that I think the hardest is to get the angels, right? While I mean these days things have gotten a lot more easier. I think there are a lot more savvy angel investors out there who understand what angel investing is, the risk that comes in.
right,
But I'm sure I think the time that you were raising angel money,
right,
angel investment was still very new, very few people. So uh, yeah, I think for a lot of young entrepreneurs out there, networking, I think that's the key thing. So Mihir, I think that's been the key success along with karma, as he puts it. So,
yeah,
so
I think
good
and,
karma
and and
and
angels are
networking,
truly
guys.
angels in that regard. I
Yeah,
mean, for us, it has been like that. I mean, we have survived, or we have been able to build through. Has been a lot of credit
absolutely,
to the angels that we have.
absolutely, absolutely. So Mihir, I mean, like any startup, right? Almost all the startup stories that we hear, you start off somewhere, and really what you're doing is you have an idea, you're experimenting, you're trying to understand how the market is sort of perceiving it,
Mhm.
and then you keep pivoting until you find a product market fit, right?
Right, right,
And that's been I think the common wisdom for almost all entrepreneurs, that what you build your first day probably is not the one that is going to
right, right,
really scale at the end of it, right? So
right.
so how have you, I mean, what's been your and I also feel that this is a very important thing from an entrepreneur's perspective, to have that mental frame of mind, that change is the reality, right? It's
Right.
not going to be the same thing that you have, right? So it's a almost a mental frame of mind that you need to have, right? So I mean, how did you sort of go through these pivots, and your learnings that could help entrepreneurs, future entrepreneurs as well,
Absolutely.
do that in a better way?
Sure. So our journey has been quite a number of pivots, and as you pointed out, that startups start somewhere else and they end somewhere else. It has
Yeah.
been a story like that for us. We started off as washing aggregators. I mean, we used to do washing for cars. We had onboarded a network of washing centers who would do washing, right? So in that case, we are lucky because in general, we found out in 30 days time that this is not a business. I mean, eventually people are happy with people who come in their apartments and do a washing. They don't need an exquisite wash. There is no market for it, right? And that was very evident from the conversations. I think first and foremost, the rule that we set worked for us was to interact with more and more customers, because they do almost all the time talking,
Yeah.
and customers who give you bad feedbacks are the ones who actually are the best in that way, right? So I think that washing gave us an experience to talk to almost thousands of customers, and they clearly ask us every time, "Hey, boss, why are you doing this? Why don't you do service and repair? Because that is where I'm facing problem." And I could correlate exactly back with our own experience, right?
Yeah.
So I think that customer interaction as a founder, uh, whoever you are you a techie or a marketing salesperson or an operations guy, right? You have to interact with your customers. They tell you the first thing,
Yeah.
first hand information. That was rule number one. The second rule we felt was that unemotional attachment to an idea, right? You have to be completely unemotional about it, right? A lot of times, in case of washing, we're very happy about it. That came within, we failed fast, or we realized that no, this is not a business. We didn't fail there, but in general, we realized that, right? But then a lot of times you do something and you get so deeper into it, right? With partners that you work with garages in our case, right, or customers that you have interacted with. There are a lot of positive signs, but then you clearly realize that it's not working. The signs are somewhere else, which are again customer experience, which are telling you. But if you get emotionally down that path, right, that kind of hinders you from any sort of pivot. right?
Hmm.
So I think that
Yeah.
was the second rule. The third is that there is always some data, right? And founders in early phase, especially, they have only some data. They don't have a lot of data, right? So that data based on the gut instinct that you have heard from customer, these are two primary factors which help you, right? So
Yeah.
in our case, when we started, moved on from washing to garage aggregation, right? Everyday calls from customers not satisfied was a wake up call for us. And we realized that no, something has to be done. While on one side, our fleet business was doing really well, where we were making money and team was also growing in that regard, but we had to suddenly stop it, right? And then we had little data about customers who we had served in, let's say, 6 to 9 months span of time. And there was a telling sign that he needs more convenient service. That's when we started toying around with Doorstep, which is one of our flagship product, right? And we tried during that aggregation days itself, we leveraged that momentum to try our Doorstep, right?
Mhm.
While we were making money on one side, we tried Doorstep by investing not too much on it, right? So that was the third pivot which we did in that regard, right? And there also it changed the game for us. I mean, instead of uh, abusive customers or irritated customers who we had not served well, we started getting a lot of good reviews. And I think that's where the power of positivity, etc., also helped. It helped us, it helped our mechanics, everyone, right? So I think
Yeah.
that data backed with so data was very clear that customers wanted convenient service and they wanted transparency. They wanted something which can be done in a shorter time. And if you look at car service, it's a grudge purchase. I mean, people want to get rid of it as soon as possible. Nobody wants to wait till a
Yeah.
long time. That's everybody desires for, right? So we did that with Doorstep. So I think that data was telling us, and we believe, "Ki nahi, yaar, yeah, this is what has to be done, right?" So I think that gut feeling, along with little data, is what helps. Uh,
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think as an entrepreneur, as you rightly said, not getting married to an idea, right? I think uh, uh, without actually going through that data, right, and what the data is telling you, right, and a lot of people there's a popular joke about data that you torture it enough, it will tell you whatever you want. Right. So I think being genuine in terms of not bringing your own personal bias while interpreting data is also, I think, very critical. Taking an honest look at data and not being married to an idea, following what the data says, I think is very critical for building a critical startup.
I'll just
Absolutely.
add one point here that I think
Yeah.
each pivot, right,
Yeah.
it teaches you a lot of things. In our case, it was our first experience as a automotive service provider, right? And
Hmm.
it clearly told us that there is a clear demand for customers looking out, right? And that was the positive aspect of it. So I think
Yeah.
pivot should be taken in that spirit.
Yeah.
You're really learning from it rather than changing track or anything. Right? You're getting
Absolutely.
stronger after those pivots.
Absolutely. 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 So I think, yeah, a lot of entrepreneurs have this challenge, the way I've seen it, right? Because they, uh, I mean, just going back to what you said, I think that how do you take basically this journey, especially the early part of your journey, right? If you are averse to basically change, then a lot of people just stick to what they started off with and try to sort of go in the same direction, though the market might be telling something else. So
Right,
I think
right.
being agile and nimble and actually, especially during the early days, open to basically change, I think is very critical to hit that product market fit. It's a journey by itself. I think it's a phase for us, for any startup by itself. Going into that phase with that open mindset, I think, is very critical. Absolutely. Right. So I think another very interesting and peculiar thing about Pitstop, right? You have had both financial investors and you have had strategic investors coming into Pitstop, right? Now, it's a very interesting situation because you have had the chance to leverage both financial and strategic investors for the goods, but I'm sure there are trade-offs as well, right?
Right, right.
So how should an early stage company look at having both of these guys on the cap table, and what do you think are the big trade-offs having these guys?
Yeah, so first I'll tell you the immense advantages, right, in terms of what it brings, right? And especially in our case, it was more like that we didn't come from automotive. We are tech guys trying to
Hmm.
solve a customer experience from first principles. We knew that customer needs these things, but then everything else was a lot of automotive, right? So I think that's where we relied or we took a lot of guidance from our strategic investors,
Hmm.
right? If you look at landmark cars, or they have been there in the industry for so long, and they have understood the industry nuances of industry really well,
Yeah.
right? So I think
Yeah.
that really worked for us. All the automotive knowledge that we have gained, a lot of credit goes to our strategic investor. The other aspect is that when you're solving a very complex problem, right, a lot of times you need to go deeper into one particular part, right? And strategics kind of allows you to go deeper into one particular part, because that's a very close association in that regard, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
where, so instead of, let's say, tying up with multiple people and do something, build something, we felt that a strategic investor gives you a chance to build something very solid with one particular entity in that regard, right? That's where also the pitfall is. It pushes you a lot of times in that comfort zone. Here, this is you get immense trust, right? If you do really good work, you get immense trust. You get a believer as a partner, right? But then that also at times sets you away from your vision. That what are you set
Mm.
out to solve, right? You're not solving really for one particular case, right? In our case, it was very clear that the whole value chain had issues, right? It was not a particular part of the chain, right? So with strategic
Yeah.
investor, we got a chance to build that deeper relationship. But that's not all. We are set out to build a much larger game. So
Yeah.
I think there has to be a balance in that case, right? That it should not set you away. That's on the positive side if you have done well with that strategic partner, right? The
Yeah.
negative side is that since it's a very close relationship, you're actually working with people who believe in you, and if there is something which happens wrong, there's a longer, I mean, drawn battle which goes on there in that regard, right? So I think you're always on that thin edge at all points of time, right? So while there is a lot of advantage, but there has to be a balance which has to be made out to set you right on that vision path to keep you straightened out in that regard.
Great. Great. I think, uh, you know, absolutely right. I think strategic investors, uh, more often than not, have been in this domain for a long time. They understand really what are the, very basic, the kind of knowledge that they have. I think they've learned it over a long period, right? But having said that, I think you rightly pointed out, they are associating with an entrepreneur because they want to do something, or rather they want to be associated with something which goes beyond what they're already doing, right? They want to see if someone can leverage what insights they have and build on top of it and build a much bigger so as long as you find such strategics who understand what they bring in and what they expect out of the entrepreneur, I think it's a very fruitful journey, right? So having that clarity with the strategics very early on, I think just paves a very good association with them. So absolutely. So I think for a lot of young entrepreneurs out there who are starting off, I think strategic investors, a lot of them only go towards financial investors, to VCs and so on. But there is an alternate path, a path where you can go towards strategics who you can bring them on, you can develop some of these deeper relationships, grow non-linearly fast with strategics. But you need to pick the right strategics who can really add value, who realize that what you're building is much bigger than just serving their immediate needs, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think the other big aspect, right, and this is again something which is somewhat unique to Pitstop in terms of how you've built your team, right? A lot of startups these days have a bunch of co-founders who start a business, who build it in that fashion. In that sense, you've been somewhat unique, where you are the founder of Pitstop. While there have been, it's largely been a journey that you have led, and now you're building a great team around you, right? So how critical is the team? How critical is it to have co-founders? I mean, insights from you on that, I think, again, will be
No,
very
I think,
helpful.
yeah. So I think if I look back the entire journey, I think that's one piece which I really regret in that regard. That I wish I had a co-founder early on, right? And I think it's required a lot of times, right? So I think it's. I mean, there's a saying: it takes two to tango, right? So you need a complementary partner, and people have their own skill sets. They have their own highs and lows. They have their own timings, right? And in their life, club their personal life cycle, or in general life. So I think. I really believe that a co-founder is really required, right? And so today, in lieu of that, we have a very solid team. So either co-founder or a very solid team that makes up for it. And I think
Yeah.
one of the things that I have learned is that while gut feeling works a lot for founders, but this is one area where gut feeling never works, right? So which is there's a process to it. Hiring your co-founder, hiring a senior leadership team, there's a process. It has to be followed. It has to be vetted. It has to be done multiple times. There's a significant amount of time that has to be spent. There is no gut feeling. And I have made some wrong decisions early in pit stop, right? Where we felt that it was more that we could get along, and it was more gut driven. That I can tell you honestly today, right? That I think that's not the right way. The right way is there's a process to it, right? And because it's a long journey. I mean, startups are never small time journey. It's a very long journey. So you have to know uh,
Yeah.
the person in and out. And there is a definite process. And we engaged with consulting companies who helped us out in that process, chalking out the org structure. I felt that I needed that, right? And that's what we took. And I think that's also what I've learned, that you have to just ask for help. And as a founder, right, you need help in a lot of things. I mean, you need help in a lot of ways, right from team to everything else, right? And that you should be very open about. And that's what I have learned, that I shouted out for help, that I need help with hiring. And people came out and they told me the process, that this is how it should be thought about, this is how you should look for, right? This
Yeah.
is how complementary, right? And then rules of hiring was very simple from day one, which is, I think, end of the day, uh, leadership, co-founder, or team is what you work with or spend your most of time with, right? So one very simple rule, that a guy who is much more smarter, talented, who I look up to all the
Mm.
time, is one of the thumb rules that I've always followed. That is this guy that I would always look up to work with, or he inspires me more than anyone else, right? I
Yeah.
like working, right? So I think those things have panned out, and today we have set a very strong leadership in that regard, irrespective of age, background, pedigree, credentials,
Yeah.
right? And then they all have a very distinct, unique qualities, and they complement. Okay, I can look up to them. So I think that gut feeling doesn't work, and the process has to be there, which is, I mean, my learning, right? And the team has to be there. People have to be there
Yeah.
to complement.
Yeah.
Another learning which I see a lot of startups that I have spoken to, early startups started by young folks, right? We overlook some of the functions like finance, HR, legal, right? And we wait for opportune moment to set those functions, right? But then I'm very sure today that that is the first team to set in general, or there has to be somebody who guides you, aligns you, mentors you along those lines. Because as a founder, when you focus on business, product, technology, etc., you need to have a CFO, you need to have a finance, legal, and especially in the businesses that we do. End of the
Mm.
day, we serve car, which is a very simple problem if you really look at it, right? But
Yeah.
then from a finance standpoint is where all the complexity is, right? So I
Yeah.
think I advise all, startups that I mentor, some of them I do, right? I tell them that get your finance, legal on day one, HR on day one. These are things that people have. Uh, if you miss out, you will have to carry the burden for a long time. It will hamper the
Absolutely.
company.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think a lot of startups that we see, very early stage startups, I think they run into trouble
Yeah.
when they don't focus so much on things like working capital, things like collection, things like
Right.
setting up a robust process for
Right.
finance.
Right.
um, it it As you rightly said, it feels like maybe these are afterthoughts. Let me build my business first, and then they will come at a later point.
Yeah.
But a lot of the times, the strength of the business model just doesn't come out without these things being in place, right? I mean, it just,
Right.
the businesses just feel flaky. The product market fit is somewhat unsure, unless you start seeing that there is a working capital efficiency, right?
Right.
Or for that matter, there is a collection efficiency, right? You might be billing a lot of people, but if you're not collecting, and if you're collecting late, right? I think a lot of these things, young entrepreneurs don't focus, especially those who have a lot of tech background. Like, I mean,
Right.
you and I, both of us have tech background, so I think we typically think the product, the technology. I think these are the things that are going to be more important. But balancing these with some fundamentals of business,
Right.
right? I think is very critical, and it requires the attention.
Right.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's a great insight here. So here, I mean, another personal question. I think now that you have crossed the Series A hurdle and on your way to go to Series B, I think this is a much more apt question now. But I'm sure there are a number of times in your journey when there were near business deaths, right? And this is part of any early stage business, right? It's a constant balance of adding customers, collecting money, making the payroll, keeping people happy, right? Keeping your investors happy. It's there's a lot of things that are going on, and there are several situations where you're also close to near death in terms of the business, right?
Right.
I mean, how do you go through those? And in your case, you didn't have a co-founder as well to sort of share all of these with them, right? So how did you sort of go through some of these? Again, what is the kind of mental framework that people should have to absorb these blows, right?
No, absolutely. So I think we have gone through multiple times, uh, and then there were a lot of external factors. For example, in 2016, demonetization kind of killed our business because ours was completely cash-driven business, at least the supply side of it, right? And suddenly the spare part supply was gone because it all dealt in cash. That was the first time. After that, GST came in and killed the business in 2017, right? So where there were large unorganized garages, right, who didn't want to go to GST, and we had to struggle a lot given that we were organizing the domain, right? So we could not afford any slackness there, right? So I think we had to stop working with a lot of garages. I mean, garages who were we had a lot of business relationship. We had to just stop working with them, right? That was the
Yeah.
second. And then pandemic, etc., was anyway a very extraordinary situation for the humankind, right? Pandemic one or lockdown two, right? And in general, I think one of the problem solving framework that I have always used or in general has worked is that from the puzzles itself. I mean, when you have a large jigsaw puzzle, right, which is broken down and you have to set pieces right, you start from a corner, right? So I think it's very critical for us to start from a corner because everything is unknown at that point of time. And we also had a situation where there were a lot of problems. Finance was a problem, business was a problem, employees, etc. Right. So I think there, the first thought, or in general, it was came, however selfish it may sound, right? It was that first you should secure yourself in some regard, which means at least mentally, right? That something is not going to affect you in that regard, or the support that I got from my family in those times was really immense. So that's how I could manage myself, right? Or at least I had an oversight. कि नहीं, कुछ नहीं होगा, we'll make through. At least my family kept telling me कि नहीं, this will pass too. There's a very common saying. So I think that came instinctively with all of those lockdowns, right? And that gives you a lot of strength in general. And then you start picking up pieces from whichever are important ones, right? And at different point of time, different things are important. For example, when GST killed our business, right, there was a different important point. Partners were very important for us because their business also had got disrupted, right? So we started a complete partner outreach program. That became our corner number one, right? Who do we go after? How do we support them in that time, right? How do we tell them to get GST enabled? What all technology support can we provide? So that's when we started building our whole workshop management, the partner app, the finance accounting piece of it, right? So that was problem number one. Similarly, GST was a similar problem. But when lockdown came in, the corner number one was something else. It was, let's say, employees. I mean, we have a very wide variety of workforce, right? From tech, product to mechanic, service advisor, right, to logistics boys, and everybody had a very uncertain future, right? So I think first thing we did was to sort out ways to secure our employees, right, in that regard, right? So whatever had to be done, or give them a lot of confidence, because eventually they are the ones who are going to be there at the toughest point of time in the company, right? So that was the corner number one. The corner number two was different things. So that's how I think that's problem solving framework has always helped in those near death. And then I think here also most important factor is, which gives you as a person a lot of confidence, is the karma, right? So I had people who I could call and tell them that I'm in trouble, can you help me out? And there were people who were willing to help me out at any point of time, whether it be in terms of emotional support or just talk it out. A lot of times you just have to talk your problems out. And as a founder, you go through a lot of mood swings in those phases. Sometimes things really start looking very bright, and the other moment it looks like it's all gone, right? So I have leveraged my angels, like truly angels in that regard, right? And I have maintained that connect. So I was very vocal and in general reached out to them a lot of times, and I got that feeling reciprocated as well. So I think finding out the right corner that you have to look at, and then find your build your support system who can also look up to you at some of those
Yeah.
moments, right?
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
those are two things which has helped us. I mean, we survived. I mean, I think one of the key things that we tell a lot of people that we meet, that you will never find a more resilient team than us. We work in a very tough domain, right? And we are changing the whole ecosystem, right? It requires that resilience, and that's
Yeah.
a characteristics, core characteristics of the company which we have evolved into, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, and as you rightly said, I think sometimes, just starting to solve a problem and, just being at it, you can slowly, I think just that just sort of, motivates you to sort of, keep solving it and, solving one at a time, right? I think a lot of the times, I think people uh, just get bogged down by the size of the problem, right? And they don't even attempt to solve it, right? And as a lot of people say, I mean, just getting out of the bed and that itself is the first step towards having an active day. So I think just starting to solve a problem, makes a big difference, right? And as you rightly said, having a sounding board, some of the people who have been there, done that, who can actually, understand what you're going through as an entrepreneur and can actually help you visualize a much better future if you keep at it. I think it's very important. I think surrounding yourself with I think that's a great advice, right? The angels are not just for the money. I think they're also people who have been there, done that. I think having them as a sounding board makes a big difference in that journey. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think another very interesting problem that most startups have, right, is whether you expand geographically or whether it could be a product business where you expand to multiple use cases, for example, or you go deeper. So if you are in one market, for example, you go deeper, you solve not just say one part of the problem, but the entire value chain, right? Before you go and expand yourself. If it's a product business, probably you go deeper on that use case. You solve that use case in and out before you start, adding use cases. This is always a challenge with a startup, especially an early stage startup, right? So when do you start expanding, right? Uh, however, generally, again, what decision metrics have you used to decide when to expand versus when to go deep? And what's your advice? Go deep or expand?
No, I think it depends on the domain that you are in, right? And I think I'll tell you how we thought about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we are headquartered in Bangalore, where we have significant business, but we're also live in 12 other cities. Here we are the leaders in the market. Delhi, uh, we expanded in last 9 months, right? Where we have started setting up our team. Now, the idea to expand to Delhi was because of only one reason, that if I was solving only for Bangalore, I could miss out on the customer nuances in Delhi, right? And if you really look at it, there's a great north-south divide in terms of customer profile, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of documented articles also around it, right? And in our domain, Delhi is the hub of auto. If I don't be there, I miss out on the whole value chain play itself, right? So I think the first thought was that we need to have a wide variety of customers, or at least our product or solution should cater to majority of customers, let's say 70-75%. If all the customers were like what we have in Bangalore all over India, you would have never expanded to Delhi in that regard, right? But then all the customers are not like that.
Yeah.
Every city has
Yeah.
its own nuances. So I think that became our decision making framework in that regard, that we need to be in Delhi, otherwise we're not solving a complete problem. What we are solving for in Bangalore will not work in Delhi, right? Because there's different customer behavior altogether. So that was one thought. The second thought was that I've always personally believed going deeper in one domain, right? Especially when you have to solve for the entire value chain. And a lot of ideas where they generate immense value only by solving the complete value chain. I mean, it doesn't come in parts, right? So let's say in our case, we deal with garages, mechanics, part suppliers, OEM players, right? So there we require to go deeper. So we set that template and then we move on. So Delhi came in for a different reason. And
Got it.
third way to look at it is that a lot of times your ability or in general your aggressiveness to move in different markets gives you that competitive advantage,
Mm.
because when you're solving for a problem in a larger context, that all India has its own advantage in that regard. For example, when we worked with insurance companies, they did not need a local player only to
Mm.
work in Bangalore. When we worked a lot with taxi fleet companies, right, they need not manage one company in every city, they needed somebody all India. So that
Mm.
was another factor that came as an advantage for us. That's how we went on to start 12, 13, 14, 15 cities, but we restricted ourselves there. The
Got it.
core playbook being formed in Bangalore is what I would have always done. But then those are the other reasons why we moved, or we think we need to have majority of customers try and test our platform, what we're
Got it.
capable.
Got it. So I think it's a combination of building or rather balancing the act of building a replicable playbook, which I think is a constant focus, with what the market needs. As you rightly said, if your customers are expecting you to, one of the differentiation or one of the way to enhance value is by being in multiple geographies. I think it's a balancing act, right?
Right,
You
right.
are building a playbook. The playbook has to be refined, and it is replicable in all the other cities. I think that's a very critical part of it. But at the same time, expecting as you grow, expecting customer expectations in terms of being in other cities or
Right,
providing them support. I think it's definitely a balancing act,
right,
right? And
absolutely.
it's a tough one as an entrepreneur. I think that's where if you don't do it well, I mean, the pitfalls, right? I mean, you
Absolutely.
expand in a business model which is very leaky, and you might not have figured out
Right,
customer retention as well
yeah,
as part of your playbook. So you expand into multiple geographies, so you're bleeding in multiple geographies, right?
absolutely.
So yeah, I don't know whether there is a clear science to it, to say, when do you end your playbook, when do you expand. I think it's an iterative process, and I think people, good entrepreneurs operate from their gut in terms of, when do they feel the playbook is good enough for them to sort of start expanding, and then keep coming back to the playbook, keep iterating on the playbook, keep building on it. Yeah, I think that's
In
one.
core, I would believe that go deeper in one city is the right philosophy to work. I mean, everything
Mm,
else is, as you said, is a balancing act to
yeah,
make sure that your playbook gets strengthened much, much. Intent was
yeah,
always to build that playbook. Yeah.
got it, got it, got it. No, I think that's brilliant. Um, Another question, right? I mean, this is again in this crazy startup frenzy. A lot of people don't talk about this as much, and I feel it's a very, very important thing. And it is for startup founders, it is for startup employees. I would say even for VCs, right?
Right, right,
Um, Balancing your physical and mental health, right? I think it's a very important part of this entire journey, right? I think this journey is a lot more fruitful if you're able to not just build a business, but build a business while you are physically fit, you are mentally fit, right? And that's the only way to probably also build longevity in terms of where
right,
you're headed, right?
right.
So as an entrepreneur, how do you sort of uh, create this, again, a very balancing act between growing your business, spending time on your business, versus also being physically and mentally fit, right? Again, it's a balancing act, but what's been your mantra and what's been your framework to
Yeah.
balance it out?
No, I think that's required. I mean, end of the day, you build something, but then you have to be there to see what is being built, right? So it
Yeah.
comes down to that ground zero, right? So I think I personally play a lot, and I encourage a lot of sports activities in the company itself, because I mean, my mental health or physical health is a lot of affected by what is happening inside the company, right? So there is one aspect that we are trying to promote a very sporty culture across all, right? That every Wednesday, Saturday, right, we do have a sports night. I mean, football or cricket, because eventually that's where you come out, and especially in the business that we are in, right, the customer centric, and that too dealing with a car. A lot of
Yeah.
times we see escalations, etc., and people have had their share of experiences in the company as well. The employees take
Yeah.
the beating a lot
Yeah.
of times, right? So I think the overall idea always has been to curtail or make that a very positive environment around, right? So sports is one thing which I believe in, and we would probably, you would see us doing more about sports as and when we go beyond Series B or so, because we think that that's where a lot of balancing act automatically comes in. You are
Hmm.
physically fit, right? And when you play sports, you forget about anything that bothers you, right? You're on your own, right? And
Interesting.
so that's rule number one that we have set. Personally, I follow it. I mean, I love playing, and if you really ask me, my IIT days, I played hockey. I just did that for 3 years. I just played hockey, and people know me that he's the guy who only plays hockey. I had very bad grades, etc. But then the sports is a very integral part, and with young
Yeah.
people joining in, or every age, I mean, there's so many things around that could be done, right? So that has to be there. So sports for me is that answer to that mental and physical balance. And in addition, you have a good support system. That's always there. That's always
Yeah.
required. People who
Yeah.
we can always reach out and talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that again, I think a lot of people. Uh, it's been my personal experience as well. I think that support system also requires a constant focus, attention. A lot of people, focus so much on their startups that they don't focus on their family as much, right? I think it's a balancing act because that support system comes to your rescue,
Yeah,
during your lows, right? But
absolutely.
during your highs, you need to make sure that that support system is being taken care of and it is getting revitalized, and those relationships are getting revitalized, and going from strength to strength. So I think it's very important that your support system gets the attention it needs as well,
Yeah.
right? Absolutely, absolutely. So great, Mihir. I think it's been an amazing journey for you. A lot of learning. I'm sure there is a lot of insights that you shared today that a lot of our entrepreneurs, young entrepreneurs, could also sort of leverage as they move forward. But in conclusion, how does the journey look for you for the next 5 years? I mean, how do you see yourself? How do you see Pitstop? 5 years down the line.
Yes, I
If you
think,
could,
yeah.
yeah.
See, from a business standpoint, right, we are reimagining the whole aftermarket ecosystem. That's where we work in, right, where customers get very convenient, transparent, and quality repair of their car, served at, let's say, multi-brand garages who have an equally well-established business that they can run, right? So we solve a lot of teething problem for these garages, which is in helping them procure a lot of parts, right? And then that's how the whole landscape is what we are changing right now, right? So in 5 years time, business wise, Pitstop will be an IPO listed company. That's what we have always imagined this business to be, because we're in a very high margin business, parts, etc. And then there's a lot of references of it around the world. So business outcome, I mean, we're very confident the path that we have chosen. That's the path where we will land in 5 years. I mean, till 1 year back, IPO was sort of a dream, but then kudos to all the people who made IPO, Vijay Shekhar Sharma or Dipinder, right, from Zomato, right? So they have been a
Absolutely.
great poster boy. So business-wise, we will be there. We'll have, I mean, in terms of people whose lives we would have affected, I think 5 million plus customers would have availed service from us at various locations. Almost 2.5 lakh mechanic service advisors whose lives we would have directly impacted, who would work in these garages. And that's a big part of our vision. If you really look at who delivers experience for Pitstop, it's those mechanics and service advisor. And from day one, I think the culture that we have set in the company is to have very high regards and respect for people who really deliver in that sense, right? So I think that's second takeaway. We really look at, or we imagine that mechanics will get the respect that they deserve. I keep saying in my new introductions that I'm a mechanical engineer from IIT Kanpur, but my mechanic knows 1,000 times more engineering, right? So I think, but
Absolutely.
then today he doesn't have a level playing ground. So I think that's how we imagine that after 5 years, mechanics or service advisors, they'll have a very high quality professional life, a very good career growth path defined, right? And they would become entrepreneurs on their own. So that's the
Yeah.
second outcome. I mean, personally for me, I think as an entrepreneur, you keep enjoying the moment that you are in, and it's a marathon, right? And as a marathon runner, goal is probably the last thing. You keep enjoying the every 1 kilometer, 2 kilometer, eighth kilometer, 12th kilometer. So I have
Yeah.
been in that journey.
Yeah.
For me, that moment then versus now, uh, uh, especially in terms of excitement around what we are doing, it would
Yeah.
probably remain the same, right? That's how I look at it, the whole journey.
Brilliant, Mihir. I think that thought process and that attitude to take people along, right? I think it's very critical. It's as much as your success, as much as it is the employees and the ecosystem's success, right? So I think taking people along, I think absolutely very critical. And as you rightly said, enjoying the journey, right?
Right.
uh, it's hard. Sometimes it feels very theoretical, but I think people who have been successful at it, enjoying their journey, I think, as you rightly said, they are the guys who can run that marathon, right? They are the guys who can actually bring that longevity. So absolutely, I think it's very important for young entrepreneurs to recognize that. So brilliant, Mihir. I think it's been a great session. It's been a lot of insights. I'm sure. I think a lot of people will benefit from your insights and your journey, right? So we may have maybe another 1 or 2 minutes. We are already at 7:30. So I'll probably maybe just take 1 or 2 questions from the audience, and then we'll end the session if that's okay with you.
Sure, absolutely. It has been a pleasure talking to you, Vinay,
Hey,
here about all the.
thanks, Mihir. So here, one of the questions is, does it work having near strangers, right, as co-founders, right? Um, Let me just, sorry, one sec. Here. Yeah. So does it work to have, strangers or acquaintances, as co-founders, as long as they bring complementing skills? I mean, how do you basically, pick your co-founder? I think you partially answered this question, but just just having complementary skills, is it enough, even if someone is a stranger, or does it have to be like someone who for an ideal co-founder, right? I think there's a second question as well. In today's scenario, can you make it work if the founding team are based in different cities, right, and plan to continue to do so, right? So you have a co-founder in a different city, right? I mean, very apt in the COVID scenario, but uh, yeah, I think that's the question. How do you pick your co-founder,
Sure.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the same principles that you would apply to pick anyone who works with you, right? So I
Mhm.
think and you almost all the time have strangers working with you in that regard. If you really look at it, right? But then they should have that sense of purpose. I mentioned about that process, right? So there is a defined process for it. It has to be followed, right? And the process could be uh, talking or spending time with that person. Process could be your mentor talking to that person. Process could be your board
Yeah.
investor talking to that person, and then there is a structured guideline around it, right? So as long as those processes are very well defined, right, uh, you could meet your co-founder. I mean, absolutely okay to work with uh, strangers as co-founder. Then there are no more strangers, because you would have spent so much of time that you could relate to them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that spending time is required, is and then not just you, but people who are going to look up to your co-founder or work with you, or people who are going to impact you. I mean, your mentors or angel investors. So as long as that process is followed, I think it's completely fine to work with strangers, because by the time they come on board, they really not are strangers. If they are strangers, then they're not co-founders, right? You would know them
Absolutely.
inside out, right?
Absolutely.
And then the second question about having a co-founder in different cities. See, ideally, I mean, it's tough. Eventually, co-founder, as you would have heard, that there's a good amount of support system which is required. Right? It's in your peers, it's in your uh, team members, family, mentors, investors. Right. So I think that becomes more difficult living in different towns unless there is compulsion. For example, if today is a lockdown, right, and you still have to build your company, and for next 9 months there is no visibility, there is no traveling, then there is an externally forced condition on you, right? And then there could be some business reasons why somebody cannot travel
Yeah.
far, right? That bonding, etc., it becomes much more better when you are around, when you work with each other, because it's not just about writing a code or solving a business problem. It's about that camaraderie. And a lot of
Yeah.
times you would need somebody to just tell you that, boss, it's all okay. Right? That cannot happen on phone, is what I believe. Right? So I think it's tough
Yeah.
finding a co-founder in different cities, according to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but we live in strange times, and as you said, maybe some of this will be forced upon us, where uh, we'll see. I mean, we have a new variant out there, so we don't know,
Right.
right? But I think, yeah, I'll go with your experience and your thought process in terms of you need someone out there, right? You need someone who is with you, who is taking those blows with you, who
Right.
is absorbing the pressure with you, right? And sometimes not having them in the same city, not working together, can create this out of sight, out of mind, right? I mean, how much of a technology is connecting us,
Right.
maybe there is a limit to how much it can
Right.
solve in terms of some of this bonding as well.
Right.
Absolutely.
And on a lighter note, another way to look at it is that it's a long distance relationship, right? And it's difficult in that regard, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Some people know how to make it work. Some
Right.
people,
Right.
I
No, right.
think majority don't know, right? Absolutely. Absolutely. I think there's one more question, and I think it's very specific to pitch stop and how do you ensure the quality of service providers, right? I mean, you have a vast number of service providers across cities, right?
Right. Right.
How do you create some kind of a check and balance or a SOP?
Right.
How do you go about ensuring that quality of service?
Right, absolutely. So, I mean, that's what we have done. And I remember talking to one of the investors a couple of months back, and they asked me what was the toughest thing to solve, right? So, which was finding out right quality partners, and that is what we have focused in last 4 years, because they are an integral part of the ecosystem that we have created, right? So, in general, we have a completely defined process checklist. It's a four step process. There are four things that we look at in each of those garage that we onboard with us.
Hmm.
Number one, which is infrastructure, tools, and technology, which is there in the garage. Number two, the mechanics, the quality of mechanics. We are a multi-brand garage. We don't onboard authorized dealers or single brand garages. We onboard only multi-brand. So there has to be a good variety of mechanics who can solve for Asian cars, German cars, American cars, all taken together, right?
Yeah,
And there should be a decent experience along each of those lines. So
yeah,
that's betting more on the hardcore mechanical aspect of it. The third most important factor for us is the entrepreneur who leads that show, right? And then we have always found that an automotive experienced guy works out much better for us, right, than a financial investor in general running that show. I mean, people who look at garages for investment, right? Those are garages which we typically don't onboard a lot more, right? Unless there is a big case for us. And the reason for that is uh, it's about end of the day, it's about the customer experience. The guy who is there on the ground has to understand the way and we understand or think about it, right? When
yeah,
we get a customer review or so, the way we deal with it, the guy on the ground has to deal or understand the importance of that, right? He should be tech savvy, he should be automotive, he would know a lot of the nuances of automotive on his own, much better than what we do. So that's
yeah,
the third factor. The fourth factor is as a responsible uh, uh, as a responsibility that we have taken to organize the industry or the ecosystem, right? We put a lot of emphasis on taxation, statutory, legal compliances and adherences, right? All our garages, they are GST enabled. We don't onboard garages at this point of time who don't have a GST, who do
yeah,
not have a cleaner financial records, because eventually that's when the garage or we start adding a lot more value to these garages. So these are broadly four parameters, and we have a completely defined process. And then we have an onboarding process where we take them through our entire garage operating system that we have built, and they have to deliver firsthand
yeah.
a right kind of experience measured by us before they actually become our franchisee partner. Right. So there is this good amount of time we have spent because that's the core part of what we are building today in the ecosystem.
Yeah, and I'm assuming a lot of technology that you're building is to ensure that or have a system which can verify the SOPs that you're putting in place, which sort of
Absolutely.
ensures that consistent delivery of service to the end customer, right? I think that's
Absolutely.
where a lot of technology gets leveraged.
Right. And we have a patent pending garage operating system, right? So
Mm,
where we tell them about what we call as guided experience, right? A customer car has to go through series of steps to ensure that experience is being delivered consistently, right? And the similar fashion all the time, right? So that's where we leverage technology. So our role is that. So once we vet right kind of garage, we take him through our technology platform, and that's where we get the control as well in that regard.
Absolutely, absolutely. Brilliant, Mihir. I think we are almost out of time, but it's been a fabulous conversation, and I'm sure there are more questions which are coming in, but unfortunately, we are really out of time at this point. But thank you again. Thank you for this session and sharing a lot of good insights with the entrepreneurs. Thank you.
So thank you so much, everyone, and Vinay. And
Hi, can I butt in and say a few words?
yeah,
Please, Mr. Yadav, please. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, guys. I've been a little under the weather. That's why I chose to keep quiet. But it's been a great listening pleasure to hear Mihir and Vinay's, what should I say? The way he asked questions and got responses, amazing. I'll be failing my duty if I don't thank both of you for having accepted our invitation at such short notice and did a fantastic job. I'll leave only one thought for Mihir. I've been an automotive component.
oh, wow, okay.
I won't call myself an expert. I'm still learning. I've been in that industry for 45 years. Today, I don't do nothing. But feel free to reach out to me. You have a mail ID.
Right.
Anytime you want to know anything about auto component business, that's the only business I know. And I've been at it from 1976, and I started in Bangalore. That's the other coincidence. I started with Bosch.
Okay.
So times have changed, models have changed, but still the auto comp business
It's a
is
great
the way
business.
it is. I understand. So feel free to reach out to me anytime here. I'd love to, contribute in whatever little way I can. Thanks,
Absolutely, I
guys.
will,
Thanks
sir.
once
Absolutely, I
again.
will.
And it's been a pleasure meeting you. When I'm in Bangalore, I'll give you a shout.
Absolutely, sir. It will be a pleasure meeting you too as well.
Thank you, Mr. Yadav.
Definitely.
Great. It was a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.